The subcommittee will come to order. The chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Cosmetics are regulated by FDA under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, FFDCA, of 1938. The FFDCA forbids the introduction of adulterated or misbranded cosmetics into interstate commerce and provides for seizure, criminal penalties, and other enforcement authorities for violations of the Act. The Fair Packaging and Labeling Act, the FPLA, also requires cosmetics to carry an ingredient declaration to help consumers make informed purchasing decisions. Unlike other products regulated by FDA, however, such as drugs and medical devices and biologics, most cosmetic products and ingredients are not subject to FDA pre-market approval. Instead, cosmetic manufacturers are largely responsible for substantiating the safety of their products and ingredients before they go to market. Currently, cosmetic facilities can register with FDA on a voluntary basis, but FDA cannot compel them to do so. While FDA has the authority under FFDCA to enter and inspect cosmetic manufacturing facilities, the industry does not pay user fees for this purpose. According to a June 2010 study by PricewaterhouseCoopers, the personal care or cosmetics industry is responsible for 2.8 million jobs in the United States, and small businesses create the vast majority of these positions. For the past several years, the industry and members of both parties have been reviewing FDA's regulatory authority over these products. One issue under review is the need for a national uniform standard for cosmetic products and preemption of state legislation. I want to welcome each of our witnesses today, and I hope you can share your perspectives on several matters, including what deficiencies, if any, you currently see in FDA's regulatory authority over cosmetics, and what new authorities, if any, do you believe FDA needs in this area? And if new authorities are needed, what will be the impact on small businesses across the country? I'll yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Lance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The personal care product industry employs over 2.8 million Americans, including over 176,000 in the state of New Jersey, the state where I am from. Their products generate over $30 billion in sales annually, including a trade surplus of $5 billion in the last reported year, 2006. As the chairman has said, personal care products have been regulated by the FDA since 1938 with the enactment of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, and that the law prohibits the introduction of adulterated or misbranded cosmetics into interstate commerce and provides for seizure, criminal penalties, and other enforcement authorities for violations of the Act. Additionally, the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act requires an ingredient declaration for cosmetics, so consumers might make informed purchasing decisions. These products are among the safest regulated by the FDA, and the agency has strong authority to regulate cosmetics. There is also a panel for cosmetic ingredient review, which was established in 1976 with the support of the FDA and the Consumer Federation of America. This panel is dedicated to a thorough and continuing review of cosmetic ingredient safety and is both independent and nonprofit and helps ensure the safety of cosmetics. Despite these standards, there does not exist a national standard for ingredients in cosmetic and personal care products. I believe a uniform standard for cosmetic ingredients would serve to enhance public health so long as it is based on sound science and rigorous safety standards. In doing so, we would ensure that the interstate flow of personal care products would not be disrupted by differing state standards. We need preemption in this area. I look forward to hearing from the panels as we discuss this important issue. And, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of the time.
Chair thanks the gentleman and recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Health, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Pitts. I appreciate your willingness to hold today's hearing on the current state of cosmetic regulation. In fact, I welcome it because our subcommittee has had limited opportunity to examine cosmetics and their use in any substantive manner. Cosmetics, like other products regulated by the FDA, are used extensively throughout the United States by all types of people, men, women, and children of all ages. According to the Personal Care Products Council, every day, millions of consumers around the world rely on personal care products. From moisturizers, lipsticks, and fragrances to sunscreen, soaps, and toothpaste, these products have become an ordinary and, in most instances, habitual part to our lifestyles. Each of us in this room likely woke up today and used up to a dozen cosmetic products before arriving at work, which we'll repeat day after day for the rest of our lives. From simply shampooing our hair to using complex formula lotions that claim to improve the appearance of our wrinkles, cosmetics are a part of our lives. Meanwhile, these products are in such high demand that there are entire retail stores dedicated to their sales. So it's no surprise to me when I hear that the industry generates more than $250 billion in annual retail sales. However, what was surprising to hear was that the FDA has little, if any, authority over these everyday products, and they certainly have little ability to ensure that the products are safe for the American consumer's use. Now, no moisturizing lotion is going to kill me if I rub it on my skin, hopefully, but it could create a debilitating rash or have a longer-term health effect as a result of everyday multiple use. So these products are not high risk, but they are by no means risk-free. So that's why I joined with my colleague and friend, Mr. Dingle, to introduce the Cosmetic Safety Enhancement Act of 2012, which is modeled after the Food Safety Modernization Act, to help address the lack of authority at the FDA to regulate cosmetics or actively ensure that cosmetic products are safe. And I believe it's important that consumers have a level of certainty about the products they're buying and using, and that if anything alarming were to come to light about one of these products, FDA would have the capability to respond accordingly. Specifically, I'm concerned that the FDA has no knowledge of the domestic and foreign facilities operating in the marketplace that are manufacturing cosmetic products. Currently, FDA runs a voluntary program, but that's, of course, incomplete. Our bill would require an annual registration for all companies, along with a fee to help maintain that activity. The bill also gives FDA a number of new authorities to put in place a comprehensive oversight program within the agency. It includes an annual listing of a company's products, demonstration by the company of a cosmetic product safety, serious adverse event reporting requirements, good manufacturing practices for cosmetic facilities, and FDA recall authority. I hope that our bill can serve as a starting point to discussions moving forward as we look to address any further cosmetic regulations. Now, I know there are other approaches to regulating cosmetics, but what is clear from all perspectives is that FDA doesn't have the authority it needs to properly monitor an industry that touches nearly every American consumer. And I believe it's time that Congress fix that problem. I hope that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will continue to work with me in a productive manner to produce a fair, balanced, and most importantly, practical product that we can all support. And again, I want to thank the witnesses that are joining us today. I look forward to continuing to work with all of them and the stakeholders to ensure we have a strong system in place to regulate and monitor the safety of our cosmetics. I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to Congresswoman Schakowsky, who has also been a leader on this issue.
Thank you very much for yielding, Mr. Pallone. The fact is this: cosmetics contain ingredients that can cause cancer, mutate cellular structure, and cause reproductive and developmental harm. Industry claims that these ingredients are present at such low doses that they aren't a problem. But men, women, and children are exposed every day to dozens or hundreds of ingredients in their shampoos, cologne, makeup, lotions, and other products. We have to consider the cumulative effect of exposure. Any bill this committee considers needs to include, as the Schakowsky-Markey-Baldwin Safe Cosmetic Act does, the following elements. 1, strong safety standards that ban carcinogens, mutagens, and reproductive toxins. 2, full ingredient disclosure and labeling. Consumers simply have a right to know what is in their products. And 3, mandatory recall authority for the FDA. There's certainly other important elements, but I wanted to mention those. I think today's testimony will underscore the need for these provisions, as well as the complexity of this industry and the need for thorough consideration of any legislation making changes to cosmetics regulations. And I yield back to Mr. Pallone.
And Mr. Pallone yields back. Chair thanks the gentleman and now recognizes the Chair Emeritus of the full committee, Mr. Barton, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Pitts. If you want to know the value of cosmetics, look no further than myself. I have a 6-year-old son, and he told me the other day that I was more wrinkly than former President Bush. We had seen President Bush, and he said, "Daddy, you're more wrinkly." Yet when I'm on TV, after I've been made up by the makeup artist at Fox or CNN or C-SPAN or one of the local television stations, he always tells me how good I look. So I'm a walking testimony to the value of cosmetics. This is an important hearing, not because of the controversial aspect of it, but because of the potential mischief that could occur from it. I would caution my friends on the Republican side of the aisle to be careful what we ask for. We just heard Congressman Lance's comments that we need a uniform standard, and I know that he says that with great sincerity. But we also just heard Congresswoman Schakowsky talked about a list of items that must be included in any legislation. We have an industry that's a $50 to $60 billion a year business, and if there are health problems that are occurring because of that business, I don't know what they are. I've not heard of any health issues that resulted from the application of cosmetics. And when I read what the industry practices are today and what the various voluntary groups are that work with the FDA, it would seem to me that we've got a system that's working. What seems to be driving this train is that some states are beginning to adopt local or state regulatory issues that make it difficult for the industries that sell, the businesses that sell, the companies that sell across state lines and to operate in some of those states. I would think that the way to address that would be to work with each of the state legislatures rather than to have a national standard, because make no mistake, if we give the FDA new authority, they're going to use it. And if we give the FDA user fee authority, they're going to expand upon it. I mean, it's almost a law of nature. If you give a federal agency more authority, they use it, expand it, and if you give them more revenue, they consume it and then come back for more. At this stage, it seems to be somewhat benign, but the longer we go, the further we go down the trail, the more cumbersome it can be. If you just look at the user fee issue for medical devices, it's currently before either the subcommittee or the full committee, then the amount of user fees they're requesting is doubled from what it was in the last reauthorization period. So, Mr. Chairman, I am very pleased that you're doing the hearing. We have an industry that is competitive internationally, that is accepted domestically, that creates tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs. One of the biggest in the world is located not in my district, but near my district, Mary Kay Cosmetics. And I see those little pink cars everywhere I go, from the women, primarily women, that are self-employed and have created thriving independent businesses with their entrepreneurship and their hard work. So if it's not broke, don't fix it. We certainly can have hearings and develop a record. But just as when I was a younger congressman, I was campaigning in an area that was not known to be supportive of Republicans, and I knocked on this man's door, and he said, "I'm Joe Barton." I said, "I'm Joe Barton. I'm running for Congress. Will you vote for me?" And he said, "Are you a Republican or a Democrat?" And I said, "I'm a Republican." He said, "I'm a Democrat." And he said, "Are you a Dallas Cowboy fan or a Houston Oiler fan?" That's how long ago it was. And I said, "Well, I'm a Cowboy fan." He said, "I'm an Oiler fan." And finally he said, "Are you a Texas Aggie or a Texas Longhorn?" And I said, "I'm a Texas Aggie." And he said, "I'm a Texas Longhorn." So I said, well, will you vote for me? And he said, son, I wouldn't vote for you if you were the only one on the ballot. So I went back to the car, and my aide said, how do we put that voter down? And I said, undecided. So Mr. Chairman put me down as undecided, but I'm going to listen with an open mind, and if we can get an agreement that doesn't give too much authority to the FDA, I'm a possible. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chair thanks the gentleman and recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Waxman, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We're all very familiar with cosmetic products. In fact, most Americans use cosmetic products multiple times every day. We apply lotions to our skin. We wash our hair when we have it using shampoos. And we brush our teeth using toothpaste. But most Americans probably do not realize just how little oversight the FDA, which is charged with ensuring the safety of these products, actually has exercised over them. Cosmetics companies are not required to register their facilities or let FDA know they even exist. Cosmetic companies are not required to report cosmetic-related injuries to the FDA or to let FDA know what ingredients are in their products. FDA doesn't even have the ability to recall these products if they are found to be unsafe. To illustrate just how small FDA's role in cosmetics oversight truly is, it's worth noting that FDA's cosmetics program is staffed by just 53 people, only 14 of whom focus primarily on cosmetics, compared to the well over 3,000 staff that make up FDA's drug review program. When it comes to cosmetics, we are essentially in a buyer's beware mode. For the most part, this may not be a problem, and because of this fact, many argue there's no need for comprehensive regulation of cosmetics. Cosmetics are not ingested like foods or drugs or implanted like medical devices. Yet we know there are some cosmetics that contain harmful ingredients. Some lipsticks were found to contain lead, a known reproductive toxin. Certain hair products have been shown to contain formaldehyde, a known carcinogen. Even some baby shampoos were found to have carcinogens in them. There can be a distinction between ingesting a carcinogen and applying it to our skin, but what we do know is what we do not know is what effect repeated long-term exposure to these chemicals on our skin might have. We know that some toxins, such as the mercury, recently found in a number of face creams, are readily absorbed through the skin. We should all be united in a goal of ensuring that the cosmetics we use, often on a daily basis, are safe. The difficulty will be in coming to an agreement on how to do this. Although there are many issues we need to resolve, I would hope we could all agree that some basic concepts should be embodied in any cosmetics program. Cosmetics companies should be required to register with the FDA, comply with good cosmetics manufacturing practices, demonstrate the safety of their products, provide adequate information to consumers about the ingredients in their products, and report cosmetics-related injuries to the FDA. FDA should have the authority to recall unsafe cosmetics, and FDA should have adequate resources to oversee the cosmetics marketplace, which in this budget climate means industry should be required to chip in by paying fees. Most important, states should be free to supplement whatever federal program we put in place so they can protect their own citizens from unsafe cosmetics. California, for example, has a safe cosmetics law that requires manufacturers to notify the state public health authorities if their products are known to contain ingredients that could cause cancer, birth defects, or reproductive harm. California has a very reasonable and balanced law that explicitly protects the public from public disclosure protected trade secret information. It's a kind of state initiative that we ought to keep in place, especially if California has a strong law and the federal government will have a weak one. That's not a case for preemption. That's a case for letting states also operate in this sphere. As with many of the other proposals we have considered in the context of user fee reauthorization, the issue of cosmetics reform is an important one we need to address on a bipartisan basis. If we can't do this in time to add cosmetics legislation to the fast-moving user fee bill, we should consider cosmetics reform separately. I would strongly oppose the addition of a cosmetics bill to the user fee package if we're not able to come to full agreement on its parameters. I want to close by saying how glad I am that we have Dr. Michael D. Bartolomeus here today to talk about the success of the California program and what we can learn from it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, thanks, gentlemen. We have two panels this morning. Our first panel, we'll call our first witness to the witness table. Our first panel will have just one witness, Mr. Michael Landa, Director of the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition at the FDA. We're happy to have you with us today, Mr. Landa, and you're recognized for 5 minutes. If you can summarize your testimony, your written testimony, be entered in the record.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am Michael Landa, Director of the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition at the Food and Drug Administration. I'm pleased to be here today to discuss FDA's oversight of cosmetics. Every day across the country, Americans use a wide variety of cosmetic products, including shampoos, perfumes, hair colors, and makeup. These consumers expect their cosmetics and the wide variety of individual ingredients in these products to be safe. FDA plays a critical role in ensuring that the nation's cosmetics are among the safest in the world. In my testimony today, I will describe FDA's current authorities and activities to oversee the safety of cosmetics, the challenges we face due to changes in the industry and the increasingly global marketplace, and the new authorities the administration is seeking to strengthen FDA's regulatory oversight of cosmetics. Cosmetic firms are responsible for substantiating the safety of their products and ingredients before marketing. However, they are not required to submit safety substantiation data to the agency. In general, except for color additives and those ingredients which are prohibited or restricted from use in cosmetics by regulation, a manufacturer may use any ingredient in a cosmetic, provided the ingredient does not adulterate the finished cosmetic and the finished cosmetic is properly labeled. If manufacturers do not remove dangerous products from the market once a safety concern emerges, the agency can pursue enforcement actions against violative products or against firms or individuals who violate the law. Regulations are in place that specify the labeling requirements for cosmetics. These requirements include, for example, the name and place of business of the manufacturer, packer, or distributor, material facts about the product and directions for safe use if they are needed, and a list of ingredients. Cosmetic product labels are not required to provide information on how consumers or healthcare professionals can report adverse events, and such reporting is not required. However, FDA has long encouraged cosmetics manufacturers and distributors to report adverse events on a voluntary basis. FDA also encourages companies to register their establishments through the Voluntary Cosmetic Registration Program and file cosmetic product ingredient statements with the agency. However, there is no requirement in the statute for firms to do either. The agency established this program and the Cosmetic Product Ingredient Statement Program to gain more information about cosmetics that are being manufactured and marketed to consumers in this country. This information enhances FDA's ability to identify potentially unsafe ingredients and finished products and to provide safety information to consumers. However, we estimate that only 1/3 of cosmetics manufacturers voluntarily file cosmetic product ingredient statements for their products with the agency. I'd now like to discuss some of the challenges we've been facing. During the past several years, Americans have seen a dramatic increase in the number and types of cosmetic ingredients and products on the market. Over 8 billion personal care products are sold annually in the U.S. Cosmetic products and ingredients are also entering the country from a growing number of other countries. From fiscal year 2004 to fiscal 2010, the number of cosmetics imports has nearly doubled. To help address this challenge, FDA and its counterparts in the European Union, Canada and Japan established a forum in 2007 to exchange ideas and better align practices for maintaining global consumer protection in the cosmetics arena. The forum, known as the International Cooperation on Cosmetics Regulation, meets annually to discuss topics of mutual interest in which cooperation may be possible. The FDA is holding a public meeting on May 15 in advance of the annual meeting in July to solicit information from interested parties. In addition to the challenges posed by an increasingly global marketplace, the cosmetic industry is rapidly undergoing significant changes as the technologies used in manufacturing become increasingly sophisticated and the ingredients more complex. For example, the use of nanotechnology may result in cosmetic products or ingredients with different chemical or physical properties than their counterparts that do not contain nanomaterials. In response to these challenges to ensure adequate oversight of cosmetics, the FY13 President's budget request includes new legislative authority for FDA to require domestic and foreign cosmetics manufacturers to register with the agency and pay an annual registration fee. The user fees would support FDA's cosmetics program and are estimated to generate $19 million in new resources. The product, ingredient, and facility information submitted with registration would expand FDA's information about the industry and better enable it to develop necessary guidance and safety standards. It would also enable the agency to identify and address research gaps, for example, about the safety of novel ingredients. Specifically, the agency would conduct the following activities with the new user fee resources: establish and maintain a mandatory cosmetic registration program, acquire, analyze, and apply scientific data and information from a variety of sources to set U.S. cosmetic safety standards, maintain a strong U.S. presence in international standard-setting efforts, provide education, outreach, and training to industry and consumers, and refine inspection and sampling of domestic and imported products and apply risk-based approaches to post-market monitoring of domestic and imported products. Overall, the new authority for registration and user fees would strengthen FDA's ability to protect American consumers from potentially unsafe cosmetic products or ingredients. In conclusion, FDA is committed to ensuring the safety of cosmetics used by consumers across the United States. The agency will continue to work closely with all its partners on a wide variety of issues important to ensuring cosmetic safety. As Congress considers potential steps to address these issues, we look forward to working with you. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss FDA's activities to ensure the safety of cosmetics, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Chair, thanks, gentlemen, and I will begin the questioning and recognize myself 5 minutes for that purpose. First, on cosmetic ingredient review. I understand that the cosmetic ingredient review is an important part of ensuring cosmetic safety and that industry participates in the CIR along with consumer groups and FDA. Can you describe briefly the composition and activities of the cosmetic ingredient review panel and what is FDA's role in the CIR?
Well, FDA is a participant. It does not vote. The membership is principally supplied by industry. It's a wide range of expertise in various disciplines, and reviews ingredients as they are brought to the attention of the CIR for possible safety problems, brought to CIR's attention either by FDA or by industry or by FDA.
Have you ever questioned the objectivity of the cosmetic ingredient review panel? Have there been instances where the FDA has disagreed with a CIR recommendation?
I'm not aware of any such instances. I think the question one might ask about the CIR is that it's because it consists of members from industry. One might ask about potential conflicts of interest, for example, the potential for bias or prejudice.
Now, I saw the President's budget request for $19 billion in cosmetic user fees. Hasn't the agency already received a substantial increase in appropriations in recent years, and why do you need those user fees?
The agency has received a significant increase over the last several years, but it still finds itself with a total of about 50 full-time equivalents to regulate a very large and growing industry. We have little more than a dozen employees who are devoted full-time to cosmetics regulation. There are other employees in the field, for example, who do cosmetics inspections along with engaging in other activities. There are employees who do research, but not on cosmetics alone. It's a rather small program in light of the size of the industry.
Now, how would small businesses be taken into account in regard to these fees?
Well, I think the precise sort of nature of the fees, whether it would be based on size of a company, gross revenue, would have to be negotiated, certainly preferably with industry and to a successful conclusion. The size of the fees could vary, for example, according to the size of a company or gross revenues. One could also consider the possibility of an exclusion altogether for companies below a certain size, or waiver provisions. I think it would be important to be flexible in that regard.
Now, you're asking for new authority in the cosmetic area. Give us a little brief background on what authority FDA currently has and what new authorities you're asking for.
FDA's current authority is principally post-market. The pre-market authority is limited to color additives. It's color additives used, in this case, in cosmetics. We have the same authority for color additives used, say, in foods or drugs, but in this case, for color additives used in cosmetics, pre-market approval of those color additives is required. We have the authority to ban ingredients when we reach a finding that they're not safe. That's authority we exercise through rulemaking. We have the standard enforcement authorities that have been in the Act since '38. Seizure against product that that is misbranded or adulterated. Injunction authority to halt shipments of products that are adulterated or misbranded. And there are criminal penalties under the statute for having committed a violation by, for example, shipping in interstate commerce an adulterated or misbranded cosmetic.
And what new authorities are you seeking, and why are you seeking them?
The request is for mandatory registration for firms domestic and foreign, because now there is no requirement for firms to register with us or for them to tell us about their products or about their ingredients. The request also, of course, is for user fees.
All right, my time has expired. Yield to the ranking member for 5 minutes for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You asked some of the questions I was going to ask, so I just crossed them out, but there's a few things I still wanted to kind of get more clarification on. Mr. Landa, in your back and forth with the chairman, you talked about the Cosmetics Ingredient Review Panel, or CIR. My understanding is that the reviews the CIR conducts and any conclusions it draws are not part of any official FDA activities or findings, and some have proposed a regulatory scheme that would have CIR findings on the safety of ingredients become accepted and enforceable by the FDA unless the FDA makes a different determination through a process that includes public notice. Many of us have some real concerns about that model, so I wanted to ask, would the FDA be comfortable with this concept of having the findings of the CIR be binding on the FDA?
Let me say first, as you note, they are not now binding on the agency.
I know they're not.
I think making them binding would raise a number of questions. As I indicated earlier, one is that the CIR is composed of individuals, experts to be sure, who are employees of the industry. So I think there's always a question about conflict of interest, objectivity, bias, prejudice, that sort of thing. I think having private sector determinations be binding on the FDA would be an unprecedented approach to regulation. I think finally there's probably a question, I certainly haven't explored it, but a question to be asked about whether that type of delegation is even lawful, is constitutional.
All right. Well, I don't think it's a good approach to put the FDA stamp of approval on what essentially industry findings about the safety of their own products. So I agree with you. Then my second area, again, the chairman went into it a little bit. In your testimony, you mentioned that FDA encourages cosmetic companies to voluntarily report adverse events to the FDA, and it encourages voluntary registration. You also mentioned that the President's fiscal year 13 budget calls for establishment of mandatory registration and fees that would cover the registration and more analysis based on, among other things, adverse event reporting. It seems to me that if the FDA were to collect fees and expend resources on these efforts, that we would want to make sure that they were leveraged to full capacity in ensuring the safety of cosmetic products. And I think at a minimum, we would want to consider making serious adverse event reporting mandatory, giving the FDA mandatory recall authority, and giving the agency more authority to understand and review the safety of cosmetic ingredients. So do you agree that these authorities and activities would be important to creating a more effective safety system for cosmetics?
Well, of course, the President's request here is for mandatory registration legislation and for user fees. The administration is not taking a position on any other authorities. I do think it would be useful to consider the value of mandatory adverse reaction reporting, and valuable to consider making explicit the authority to establish current good manufacturing practice requirements for cosmetics. We believe we have that authority, but it always helps to make it more explicit. And there are probably other authorities that would be useful to consider, and certainly the agency would be happy to work with the committee on that if it desires.
All right, thanks. I know, again, I'm just trying to get a little more specific. I know the chairman asked about a small business exemption. You know, we had, Mr. Dingell and I had that in the Food Safety Modernization Act. We had small food processors that made most of their sales directly to consumers and have less than 500,000 annual sales were exempted from some of the requirements of the Act. Do you believe a similar small business exemption would be necessary? Do you want to comment on that a little more about what kind of
Perhaps I was unclear. When I was responding to the question, I meant to respond to it in the context of user fees. And to say that in the context of developing a structure for user fees, one could tie them to the size of the number of employees, gross revenues, have different fees depending on size. One could also consider exclusions altogether for businesses below a certain size, as well as, I think, waivers. But my comments were addressed to the effect of user fees on small business.
So you wouldn't argue for an exemption from other requirements, other than user fees?
The administration hasn't taken any position on any of these requirements, so I don't really have nothing to add beyond my observation that I was focused on user fees.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair thanks the gentleman and recognizes the Chair Emeritus of the full committee, Mr. Barton, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to ask one or two questions, then yield the balance of my time to Congresswoman Blackburn. Mr. Waxman, in his opening statement, seemed almost insulted that there were only 53 people at the FDA that dealt with cosmetics. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if things are working pretty well. More regulators doesn't automatically make for a better America. Where is the fire at the FDA that we have to have these new authorities and these user fees? What's the huge problem here that all of a sudden we need to enact some sort of additional federal authority?
Well, let me make two observations. The first is that in the most recent year for which we have information from a voluntary system, there are several hundred reports of problems and I think more than 100 instances of some harm. And that's a voluntary system, which I think by definition does not capture the universe. The second point I'd make, though, is the request here is for mandatory registration That would encompass facilities, products, and ingredients, from which we'd learn about the universe. It's pretty clear at the moment we don't really know how many facilities there are, how many products there are, how many ingredients.
Well, wouldn't some sort of a increased disclosure pretty well handle it? I mean, I cannot imagine any consumer in America that would knowingly purchase a cosmetic that had a real health issue. I mean, all it takes is one Facebook or one Twitter message, and that product is dead or in a doornail. I mean, why increase the regulatory burden if in fact you said hundreds? Well, there are 300 million consumers in America. You know, I guess there are probably people that abuse aspirin, that take too many aspirin.
Well, again,
we don't take aspirin off the market because of that.
The hundreds we're talking, several hundred I mentioned, is in a voluntary system, which surely does not reflect the total number of complaints. I think this is an area in which it is hard to imagine that label disclosure alone would provide adequate protection. People are, seems to me, unlikely, or may well be unlikely, to know just from reading a label.
I'm going to yield to Ms. Blackburn, but because I promised her some time, and it's only 2 minutes left. But I don't see a problem here. I really don't. And if you need another $19 million, do a little internal soul searching and find $19 million in savings out of the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that the budget of the FDA is. With that, I'm going to yield the balance of my time to Congresswoman Blackburn.
And I thank the gentleman. Mr. Landa, I want to talk to you about one specific product. And I've been on this issue now for a while, and we've got some cosmetic companies that are out there. They're marketing products with the active pharmaceutical ingredients that are used in Latisse. And we have written letters. We have tried to get an answer. We'd love to get these products off the market because they have an active pharmaceutical ingredient. So what else beyond warning letters can the FDA do to prevent these companies from marketing pharmaceutical products as cosmetics? And why do you think the FDA might be so hesitant to take some action on these cases?
Well, if a product can be both a cosmetic and a drug, and if it is a drug by virtue of the uses, its intended uses to cure, treat, mitigate disease, for example, it is subject to the drug requirements of the Act, typically the new drug requirements of the Act, meaning that...
But the FDA doesn't seem to be taking any action, even though this has been brought to their attention and followed forward on.
Could you give me the name of the product?
Latisse, and I'll be happy to give you additional information. I think that our issue is this. You requested funding. So in '05, the Office of Cosmetics and Colors had been reduced to $3.5 million and 10 FTEs to oversee $11 billion of products sold annually. In '07, it went to $10 million, and then we responded, and FDA's cosmetic activities were funded in '12 at $11.7 million with 20-plus FTE positions. The concern is this: in order to keep the marketplace safe, in order to provide confidence to the millions of American women that use cosmetic products and also use some products that have active pharmaceutical ingredients in them, like Latisse, what we want to do is make certain that you all are doing the work and carrying forward on this workload. So we'll give you, my time is out, and we'll give you the appropriate information so that you can give us a written and detailed response, and I yield back.
I will do that. Thank you.
Chair, thanks to the gentlelady. And recognizes the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Landa. And I want to associate myself with the remarks and the questioning, the line of questioning of Congresswoman Blackburn that we need to follow up when questions are raised about the safety of products. How many cosmetic companies are there?
We don't have a complete list.
And how many chemical ingredients are used to formulate cosmetics?
We don't have a complete list.
And how many chemical ingredients have been banned for use in cosmetics in the United States?
I think the number is about a dozen.
Actually, I believe it's 10. And how many chemical ingredients have been banned for use in cosmetics in the European Union?
I don't know.
That's over 1,200. And you talked about how we're working with the European Union and other, to deal with this issue. Did you know? So we might want to look at what they're doing. In its 37-year history, the industry-funded Cosmetic Ingredient Review Panel has reviewed just 11% of the 10,500 cosmetic ingredients cataloged by FDA. According to a 2004 study by the Environmental Working Group, the 89% of ingredients that remain unassessed are used in more than 99% of all cosmetic and personal care products on the market, used by pregnant women, children, and the elderly. So what kind of pre-market testing and safety substantiation is required by the FDA of cosmetic ingredients before they're allowed to go into cosmetic products?
The statute setting aside color additives, which I mentioned earlier, there is no pre-market approval requirement that applies to cosmetics. The companies are responsible for ensuring that the products they market are safe. We certainly encourage them to do testing that's both adequate and appropriate to the task, but they are not required to submit the results of testing to us.
And even of the 10 ingredients that have been banned, is there post-market testing? Does the FDA check and see if these ingredients are showing up?
We do some monitoring. So, for example, we have found mercury in products offered for import and have prohibited their importation.
So when you check, you have actually found those ingredients
from time to time, yes.
Okay. I wanted to, in part, respond to Chairman Emeritus Barton's that everything is just fine. I wanted to just read a portion of a letter from a Jennifer Arce, a salon worker. She said, "I have loved every minute of my career as a stylist until a product called Brazilian Blowout completely changed my life as I knew it. The FDA has found hair smoothing products, including Brazilian Blowout, contain between 8.7 and 10.4% of the carcinogen formaldehyde, but these products have been labeled as formaldehyde-free." First of all, let me just ask you this. If they're labeled as formaldehyde-free, even though they have formaldehyde, what authority do you have to deal with that?
Such a product would be misbranded, and in fact, we issued a warning letter to a company marketing such a product,
But the FDA,
citing both safety grounds and the labeling issue you've just alluded to.
right, but she goes on to say the FDA does not have mandatory recall authority and could not recall these products, leaving salon workers and consumers at risk. Is that true?
It is correct that we do not have mandatory recall authority.
So here's what she says, though, that when a client's hair is blow-dried, flat-ironed, curled, or is processed under the hood dryer, the fumes that come out of her hair upon heating make me and several of my co-workers symptomatic all over again. Instantly, I get a sore throat, dry mouth, difficulty breathing, dehydrated, a migraine cough, my tongue gets completely numb, burning and watering eyes, blurred vision, burning lungs. I now get scabs on the inside of my nose. I become almost bedridden from how raw my throat becomes. She goes on about the inhalers that she has to use. I'm getting sicker and sicker with every exposure. It's taking me longer to recover each time. I've never had any type of respiratory problem, nor have I ever used an inhaler before my Brazilian blowout exposure. It just seems to me that when we have the average consumer using 10 personal care products, we use them on our children, men use them as well, that we need to give the FDA more authority. And I would yield back, but Mr. Chairman, if I could ask for unanimous consent to put some documents in the record. You check those?
Without objection.
Thank you.
Chair thanks the gentlelady and now recognizes gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Landa, thanks very much for being here today. I'd like to just ask a couple questions this morning. The first is, I think that Chairman Emeritus Barton kind of asked a little bit on how many, I think you said there were several hundred reported instances every year of products that
this was
that you
several hundred in fiscal 2011, the most recent year for which we have information.
Okay, and that's what would be reported to FDA?
Yes.
Is there an idea how many are that are reported in the news? Do you follow that at all?
Not in a way that would permit compilation.
Okay. And the next question is as I was looking at your testimony on page 6, and you're talking about how many cosmetics have been imported from fiscal year 2004 to 2010, that's nearly doubled from 1 million to about 1.9 million imports. Of those that are imported, do you see a change in those? Those are ones that might have more problems being reported? Do you check those?
We do some monitoring. It's obviously with numbers like that, the agency cannot even eyeball, much less do much testing.
Okay. When you say monitoring, what do you do? Do you have like selected products that you just kind of randomly take and bring in to check, or how do you do that?
We'll look for products of certain type products. We'll look for certain types of ingredients. I mean, one example, there was a problem several years ago with face paint product from China. It was the kind of products that Boys and Girl Scouts would use at various parties. And so we, as an example of a type of product we keep an eye out for, there having been a problem with it once. We keep an eye out for it.
Okay.
To prevent the problem from recurring.
Okay, and then when, also in the testimony, and you also pointed out a little bit later about that the United States, the European Union, Canada, and Japan are all kind of in a consortium. Would that be the best way to say it, looking at products?
And ways of dealing with the industry. So, for example, there's been agreement on looking at a certain international standard as the basis or a set of principles for current good manufacturing practice regulations. We're trying to reach agreement on ways of reducing animal testing.
Do other countries adhere to that aren't part of that consortium?
I think it varies.
Are there some countries, again, going kind of back to the importation, are there some countries that are making cosmetics that you'd say would be having more problems than others?
I think in some cases we know more about manufacturing, so we probably know more about manufacturing, for example, in Western Europe than we do in China or in India.
Okay. Yeah, when these, I guess that's kind of comes back to the earlier question about looking at the products that are coming in that are imported. Are those countries then looked at with a keener eye than others?
We try to do that.
Okay. Any idea how many of those imports come from those countries that aren't part of the Japan, European Union, Canada, U.S.? They're being imported.
I don't know. I can see if you like. I could see if we can get a handle on that.
Okay. And then also, when you're talking about the voluntary cosmetic registration program, you say that you've currently got about 1,600 domestic and foreign registered cosmetic establishments. what percentage would that be of overall then that would be out there? Is it very, very small percentage or a large percentage?
I don't think it's very, very small, but I think the answer is we don't really know. I mean, I don't think it's 2%, but I don't think we know that it's 35 or 28 or 17.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my question. I yield back.
Chair thanks, gentlemen, and recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Towns, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank you, Mr. Lander, for being here to testify today. I want to sort of follow up on the question that was sort of raised by Congresswoman Blackburn. I would like for you to just let me know exactly what can the FDA do to protect consumers in cases where the agency knows that there is a misbranding. What can you do?
Working through the Department of Justice, we can effect a seizure of such a product. Also, again, working through the Department of Justice, we can obtain an injunction to prohibit manufacture and shipment of the product. There's also, and there is under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, there are criminal penalties, so that's another remedy available.
So in the event that you are now able to get the user fees, what difference would it make?
I think user fees would help us set safety standards, say for microbiological safety, to the extent we found it necessary. It would enable us to focus on ingredient safety. I think it would help us establish current good manufacturing practice regulations. The process is difficult. It would enable us to have more investigators in the field doing inspections of cosmetic facilities. Fees would enable us to do training, to do education, to do outreach, and to perhaps strengthen the voluntary reporting system. Just a word about training. I mean, in some ways, for sort of the easy part of this, easy in quotes, is establishing the standards. The hard part is securing compliance, which requires training of investigators, but also outreach to industry and training and technical assistance. Because the idea is that you want to bring everyone along to comply. It's not practical to seek to obtain compliance simply by using the standard enforcement tools.
Yeah. All right. Just assuming that you get the user fees and as you request, would you also ask for recall authority?
The administration has not taken a position on that. I think the question there is what one might want to do is look at the utility of that kind of authority in other contexts, I mean, before making a judgment about its utility in this context.
Right. Mr. Chairman, on that note, I yield back.
Chair thanks, gentlemen. Recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Lance, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being with us, Mr. Landa. Congresswoman Blackburn began the discussion, and I would like to continue it regarding the Latisse example, originally used, as I understand it, for glaucoma and more recently for enhancement of eyelashes. We know that the pharmaceutical company, I believe it's Allergan, did the right thing. It submitted its product for appropriate approval with clinical testing data through the FDA's drug approval pathway, despite its being costlier and resulting in the products taking longer to reach market. Are you concerned that if the FDA does not adequately prevent the illegal marketing of pharmaceuticals as cosmetics, then we will be creating an incentive for companies simply to bring new products to market as cosmetics, avoiding the costs and delays associated with the drug approval pathway?
I think that is a possibility, yes, that obviously it is much more expensive to bring a
Yes.
product to market as a drug. It
Yes.
typically entails going through the new drug approval process. And I should have said earlier, we will get back to you about the question that Ms. Blackburn asked, but Latisse, now that I'm remembering, is marketed as a drug and not as a cosmetic.
Correct.
When companies...
And those companies doing the right thing are at a market disadvantage with those companies not doing the right thing, many of them from abroad.
If they are marketing as a cosmetic, a product that is truly a drug, that is
Yes.
correct.
Yes.
Claims can make a difference, so depending on the nature of the claims, a product may be a cosmetic alone and
Yes.
not a cosmetic and a drug.
Well, thank you. I hope to continue to work with you on this issue. I think we need an even playing field, especially for the companies that are doing the right thing, American companies in my judgment, and others are not doing the right thing. You mentioned an increase in products that are marketed as cosmetics but list ingredients that are themselves drugs or would normally cause the product to be classified as a drug. How does the agency handle products that do not list the ingredients in question or modify claims in such a way to mask the inclusion of an active pharmaceutical ingredient?
Well, if the ingredient is of the type you've described is not listed, then the product is misbranded because
Yes.
the listing of
that
sort of ingredient is required.
And do you take enforcement action in that case?
We certainly can, ranging from a warning letter at the administrative level to the types of actions I described earlier, seizure. And
Are we not more likely to continue to see an increase in these types of products if the FDA allows products to be illegally marketed in this manner?
I think if companies look at a market and see that there is an opportunity that the government is not attending to, they're more likely to continue focusing on that market.
Thank you. I think that is certainly accurate and obvious, and I hope to work with the FDA in a way that makes sure that we all play by the same rules on an even playing field. I do not believe that is the case now, and I respectfully suggest that the FDA needs to do a better job in this area, and I look forward to working with you, certainly with other members of the subcommittee on this important issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Chair thanks the gentleman and recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to be honest with you, I'm not a cosmetic expert, and I'm not going to try to be one. But I do know that you know, when we in downtown, even in rural America on Main Street, America, you have beauticians, and you have in the malls, you still have a kind of vast array of consumer good and economic activity in this sector. I think in your opening testimony, you talked about $60 billion in sales per year. Do we know how that's broken down as to large versus small businesses and the number of jobs that are in this sector?
I think that information is knowable, but I do not know it.
Okay, and of course, it's just the constant debate about the balance. And as we want to protect consumer safety, we want to also make sure that we're not providing a great disincentive to some of these very small businesses that really rely on the cosmetic sector and in their own families' welfare. I mean, it's a very vibrant aspect of our economy. So let me go to a debate on the whole safety of this cosmetic debate, and I guess one of my concerns was that when we talk about the scientific evidence when the scientific evidence suggests that a certain tolerance level be set for a constituent to ensure safety, then the scientific evidence would suggest that the tolerance level is appropriate for all areas of the country to ensure safety. That's a question. If you have scientific evidence, that should apply across the board, regardless if you're in, let's pick a state like California versus a state like Illinois. Would you agree that really the scientific evidence should be the base, and that should move decision-making on the regulatory regime?
Yes. The only caveat is that sometimes the scientific evidence isn't, and experts' opinions of it aren't completely clear, or there isn't a complete consensus. So there may be a view that level X is sufficient to provide protection, and there may be another view based on the same data that level Y, which is lower or higher than level X, is sufficient to provide adequate protection.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but I mean, in that's why it's science and methodology and the scientific method versus opinion. And the concern is allowing opinion to rule or overrule what is a scientific consensus. And I know you're going to be careful not to upset the apple cart here, but I'm just making that point, you know, establishing that, because not just in this sector, but we see that in other sectors of the federal government, as the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Health Subcommittee. People will eventually come to us and say, please help us get to a scientific point in the debate so that there's one standard versus 50 different standards. Or I think the other thing that drives me a little bit crazy is when large states might be able to extort the private sector based upon their view of what the scientific evidence might be, and really change market dynamics on products, goods, and services.
The only point I was trying to make about data is that different and equally qualified experts applying the same criteria can look at the same data set and reach different conclusions about a level that is intended to be protected.
And I'm not going to disagree with that. I'm just going to say in an international market, in the Interstate Commerce Clause, having a single standard, eventually, nationally, you have to make a decision. And that decision ought to rely across. You did confirm, and excuse me, Chairman, let me just go on, that the current FDA law requires manufacturers to substantiate the safety of their products before marketing. You did make that statement to a question earlier.
The law, in effect, places on companies the burden to market products that are safe.
Thank you.
And to not market products that are not safe.
Thank you.
Chair, thanks to the gentleman. That completes the questioning for the subcommittee members. We have a member of the full committee here who would like to ask questions. Without objection, Chair recognizes the gentleman, Mr. Markey from Massachusetts, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Most people assume that their favorite beauty, bath, and bath products have been approved by the FDA before they hit the shelves, but looks can be deceiving. The products that are labeled purifying, cleansing, or safe and gentle for baby are among the least regulated consumer products on the market. And when we talk about cosmetics, we're talking about men as well. We're talking about their shaving cream, their shampoo, their deodorants, their aftershave, go all the way down the list. Okay, so this is the modern world we live in. So more than 12,000 unique chemical ingredients are used in personal care products. Many of these have been linked to cancer, infertility, behavioral problems in children, and other chronic conditions. The majority of these have never been assessed for safety in cosmetic products by any independent or government body. The only federal agency that has jurisdiction over cosmetic products, the FDA, currently operates with their hands tied. The Cosmetics Department within FDA operates with only a handful of employees and lack a significant authority to address these concerns. Representative Schakowsky and Representative Baldwin and I introduced a bill in the last Congress and then again in this Congress, and we spent the Congress before that doing the research and putting the concept together to regulate this area. And I look forward to working with my colleagues in order to ensure the safety of all personal care products. Mr. Landa, does the FDA have the authority to ensure that products like bubble bath or baby lotion is free from toxic chemicals like formaldehyde before they hit the shelves?
The agency does not have pre-market approval authority for cosmetics. As I mentioned earlier, our pre-market approval authority extends only to color additives used in cosmetics.
Thank you. If the FDA believed that the level of formaldehyde found in a baby bubble bath was harmful, could it require a recall of that product from market shelves?
It could not under current law.
In the 1800s, arsenic was sold by pharmacists everywhere as a soap to rid the skin of liver spots, blotches, wrinkles, and other signs of aging. Turns out you never have to worry about aging if you rub arsenic on your face every day, because arsenic helps you avoid the aging process altogether. If a company decided to include arsenic in 2012 as a component of a face cream, would they even have to notify the FDA first?
It would not.
It would not.
Correct. There is no pre-market notification requirement.
There is no market notification to the FDA that a company would include arsenic in a face product. Now, if the arsenic was used as a component of a fragrance mixture, would the company be required to list arsenic on the product label?
As a component of a fragrance, it would not.
It would not. So that would come, I think, as a shock to most people, because, you know, we're in a consumer society today where everyone assumes that on the box of cereal or any other product which they are going to use for their family, that they can turn the box around and check it out, see what's in it. But arsenic is just not something that would have to be listed because the FDA does not have the authority to require that to be disclosed to the public. And I think therein lies the problem. Give the public the information they need. And once they do, boom, you're going to see the changes that are needed. And as well, the FDA should be able to do what it takes in order to protect the public in this sector. So from my perspective, I think, you know, whether it be the male or the female in the family, whether it be the baby in the family, that everyone has a right to be protected. Everyone has a right to know what could happen to them because of exposure to these chemicals. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the courtesy of being allowed to ask these questions.
Chair thanks the gentleman. That concludes our questioning for the first panel. Chair, I'd like to thank Mr. Landa for your testimony, your answering of questions, and if we have any follow-up questions, we'll send them to you. And
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Respond. Thank you. We'll call our second panel to the witness table at this time, and I'd like to thank all of them for agreeing to testify before the subcommittee today, and I'd like to quickly introduce our expert panel. First, Dr. Helena Breslavic is the Chief Scientist and Executive Vice President for Science for the Personal Care Products Council. Mr. Peter Barton Hutt is Senior Counsel at the Washington, D.C. law firm of Covington and Burling and a lecturer on food and drug law at Harvard Law School. Ms. Curran Dandaran is the Chief Executive Officer, co-founder and co-owner of Jack Black, LLC. Ms. Deborah May is the President of Wholesale Supplies Plus in Broadview Heights, Ohio. And Dr. Michael DeBartolomus is the chief of the Occupational Lead Poisoning Prevention Program in California, Safe Cosmetics Program for California's Department of Public Health. Again, thank you all for coming. We have your prepared statements, which will be made part of the record. We ask that you summarize your opening statements in 5 minutes. Dr. Brzlovic, we will begin with you. You're recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your testimony.
Chairman Pitts, Ranking Member Pallone, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you on behalf of the Personal Care Products Council. My name is Helena Brzlovic. I hold a PhD in medicinal chemistry and am the Chief Scientist and Executive Vice President for Science for the Personal Care Products Council, the trade association representing more than 600 member companies that manufacture, distribute, and supply the vast majority of finished personal care products marketed in the United States. Prior to joining the Council, I spent 14 years at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, worked in the private sector as a medical device consultant, and served as the Deputy Director of the Cosmetic Ingredient Review, CIR. Cosmetics are among the safest category of products regulated by FDA. The safety of our consumers and their families is always the #1 priority for our industry. Careful and thorough scientific research and development are the most important aspects of cosmetic formulation and the foundation for everything that we do. The cosmetics industry invests more than $3.6 billion each year on research and development and to ensure product safety. Companies conduct thorough product safety evaluations using the same science-based approaches embedded in FDA, EPA, and other regulatory agencies around the world. Numerous health questions are addressed, including, but not limited to, the potential for cancer, reproductive harm, and allergy. A complete safety assessment also accounts for who uses the products, how they are used, and how often they are used over a lifetime. The foundation of science-based safety assessment is that any ingredient has a safe range and an unsafe range, whether it is water or a vitamin or a newly discovered compound. An ingredient's safe range is defined through many studies. In formulating cosmetics, companies choose ingredients that can be used well within their safe range and avoid ingredients that cannot be used safely. Once a product is in use, companies continue to monitor consumer experience in the marketplace. Our industry also supports independent programs to review product and ingredient safety. The most significant example is the Cosmetic Ingredient Review, or CIR, which was established in 1976 with support from the FDA and the Consumer Federation of America. Today, CIR is the only scientific program in the world dedicated to a systematic, thorough, and continuous review of cosmetic ingredient safety in a public forum. The CIR expert panel is an independent body of world-renowned physicians and scientists, most of them who are affiliated with academic institutions, who assess cosmetic ingredient safety data in an open and public manner. The FDA, Consumer Federation of America, and the Council are non-voting members of CIR. CIR has reviewed the safety of more than 2,400 cosmetic ingredients, some of them specifically at the request of FDA. Consumers, scientific, and medical groups nominate the expert panels who must meet strict conflict of interest standards. The expert panel members are not industry employees. CIR maintains a completely transparent process. All meetings and safety data are open to the members of the public who can raise issues for consideration by the CIR panel. Their findings are published in the peer-reviewed journal, the International Journal of Toxicology. We strongly recommend that FDA incorporate the CIR into its cosmetic regulatory process by formally recognizing its findings. Science and safety are the cornerstone of the cosmetic industry, and collectively, we must remain steadfast in our commitment to safety. I'd like to take off my science hat for a minute and say a few words about the enormous contributions our industry has in making the U.S. economy stronger, especially how the cosmetic industry plays a unique role in empowering American women, both as consumers and professionals. Women make up 66% of our industry's workforce and hold more than half of the management positions. Our member companies offer women strong entrepreneurial opportunities that offer personal growth and economic freedom. Chairman Pitts, Ranking Member Pallone, distinguished members of the committee, the cosmetic industry puts consumer safety first, and we will continue to proactively work to ensure the products we manufacture contribute to the well-being of American consumers. Thank you.
Chair thanks the gentlelady and recognize Mr. Hutt for 5 minutes for opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Pallone, and members of the committee, I'm Peter Barton Hutt. I am Senior Counsel in the Washington, D.C. law firm of Covington & Burling and a lecturer on food and drug law at Harvard Law School, where I have taught a full course on food and drug law for the past 19 years. During 1971 to 1975, I served as Chief Counsel for the Food and Drug Administration. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today on behalf of the Personal Care Products Council, the trade association representing the cosmetic industry in the United States and globally. First, let me briefly describe the Council and the United States cosmetic industry. The Council represents not only well-known United States and global brands, but the majority of the members have 50 or fewer employees. Over 90% of all cosmetic companies in our country are small businesses that have 50 or fewer employees. We are here today to discuss future FDA regulation of this cosmetic industry. I would like to make 3 points. First, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938 creates a strong framework for FDA regulation of cosmetics. Under this law, it is a crime to market an unsafe or mislabeled cosmetic. Cosmetic companies are required to substantiate the safety not only of their products, but also their individual ingredients before being marketed to the public. My second point is that the basic statutory provisions that govern FDA regulatory authority today were put in place in 1938. Since 1938, FDA and the cosmetic industry have worked together to keep pace with changing technology by promulgation of creative regulations and the establishment of new regulatory programs. But even though FDA has repeatedly stated that cosmetics are the safest products they regulate, it is time to bring FDA's statutory authority up to date. My third point is that we believe that Congress can address these developments by making simple but important changes in FDA's statutory authority over cosmetics. We offer the following 7 principles to guide this effort, and we support enactment of legislation that includes all of them. First, enacting into law the existing FDA programs for registration of manufacturing establishments and listing of cosmetic products. Second, requiring submission of reports on adverse reactions that are both serious and unexpected. Third, mandating FDA regulations establishing good manufacturing practices for cosmetics. Fourth, establishing programs to require FDA to review and determine whether controversial cosmetic ingredients or constituents are or are not safe, followed by strong FDA enforcement. Fifth, requiring FDA review of all cosmetic ingredient review determinations on cosmetic ingredient safety and either acceptance or rejection of those determinations, again followed by strong FDA enforcement. Sixth, FDA establishment of a national cosmetic regulatory data bank for use by everyone in the country. And seventh, an unambiguous congressional determination that as modernized, the revised statute will apply uniformly throughout the country. Concerns about safety of cosmetic ingredients must be addressed as rapidly as possible by FDA scientists. Congress should define a clear path for anyone to request that FDA review the safety of a cosmetic ingredient or constituent. We believe this will allow concerns about cosmetic ingredients and their constituents to be resolved expeditiously by the appropriate federal agency, the experts in the field, the Food and Drug Administration, rather than by 50 disparate state agencies. Under recently enacted laws, cosmetic companies must now submit ingredient reports to 4 different states, and there are copycat legislation efforts pending in additional states as well. None of these laws is consistent with the others. It is extremely important for the protection of the public and the vitality of this industry that FDA establish national standards on safety so that they apply in every state. It is impossible to formulate innovative products if different safety standards apply in different states. That is why national uniformity of these regulatory changes is critical to our support of this legislation. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Pallone, members of the committee, thank you again, and we look forward to working with you.
Chair, thanks, gentlemen, and now recognize Ms. Dandurand for 5 minutes for opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Pitts and Ranking Member Pallone. My name is Curran Dandurand, and I'm the CEO of Jack Black, LLC, a company I founded 12 years ago with my husband and my colleague, Emily Dalton. We founded the company with our combined life savings and a vision of a market segment that we believed was underserved. Our company develops and markets quality personal care products for men under the brand name Jack Black. When we started, it was just the 3 of us operating out of our homes. We now employ 39 people plus another 30 part-timers, and we have office, distribution, and warehouse facilities. Jack Black is sold in all 50 states and in international markets, and virtually all of our products and packaging are manufactured here in the United States. I am here today as a small business owner. When we started our business, there were only a small number of companies that marketed a full line of personal care products for men. Today, and in part due to our own success, this has dramatically changed, and there are many more brands in the category. Some of these brands are being marketed by large, very powerful multinational companies with significant advertising and marketing resources. For smaller companies like ours that don't have these resources, the key to our growth is product innovation. New product innovation is the lifeblood of our business and drives our success. Product safety is a cornerstone of our brand philosophy. The first step in our product innovation process is to conduct an extensive ingredient review of the proposed new formula. And we confirm that the individual ingredients are safe and the combination of the ingredients is safe. The next step is to test the new formulation using the Human Repeat Insult Patch Test, or HRIPT. And this ensures that the formula is non-irritating and non-allergenic. Once the product has passed the HRIPT, then we proceed to consumer panel testing to confirm product performance and consumer acceptance. The other key concern in the product development process is making certain that our products can be produced within our cost parameters and that they are fully compliant with the laws of all jurisdictions. Currently within the United States, there's been a movement to create separate state requirements. These regulations would be separate and apart from and inconsistent with the federal standards established by FDA. Having to be knowledgeable about and comply with potentially 50 different standards on labeling, ingredient safety, registration requirements would be burdensome and impossible for a small company like ours, even successful ones. Smaller companies simply do not have the resources to develop and maintain separate inventories to meet the different state laws, and we cannot afford to have the regulatory staff needed to monitor and meet the registration requirements contained in some of the proposed state legislation. Compliance with separate state laws would trigger an avalanche of costs, as companies have to make labeling and packaging changes, formulation changes, undergo new testing for each and every unique state requirement. I can tell you, if this had been the regulatory landscape 12 years ago when I started Jack Black, we would have had a very difficult time getting out of the starting gate, much less become successful. And our company and product line would probably not exist today. It's absolutely clear that myriad diverse state regulations would substantially increase the cost of producing and distributing personal care products, with a disproportionate impact on smaller companies. Consequences for small business owner would be disastrous. Many would have to stop doing business in states where they could not afford to comply. Others would go out of business altogether. For those that remain in the market, they will have to pass along significant price increases to their consumers to cover the higher cost of doing business. The end result is significant additional cost to small business, plus jobs and revenue losses for the economy, but without any corresponding consumer benefit or improvements in product safety. The science does not change from state to state. Therefore, it does not make sense for varying state regulations regarding cosmetic safety standards. For the benefit of all stakeholders, consumers, personal care marketers, as well as regulators, there is a need for one consistent national standard which protects consumer health and safety and provides clear direction and certainty for the regulated companies and the regulators. Do I need to stop?
No, are you finished?
I have like 2 more sentences.
Go ahead. You may
Okay.
conclude.
This would mean transparency in all health and safety decisions and a single forum where all can participate. We support the modernization of FDA laws that creates a national standard for cosmetics. I believe this will best protect the health and safety of our consumers and provide a strong foundation for growth and success of our small entrepreneurial companies that create jobs here in the U.S. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you.
Chair thanks, gentlelady, and now recognize Ms. May for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Pitts, Ranking Members Pallone, and members of the Subcommittee on Health. Thank you for this opportunity today. My name is Deborah May, and I am president of Wholesale Supplies Plus in Broadview Heights, Ohio. I am honored to offer my testimony on behalf of the members of the handcrafted soap and cosmetic industry. 16 years ago, I was working as a registered nurse in the ICU at the Cleveland Clinic. On August 1st, 1996, I gave birth to my second daughter, who was eventually diagnosed as being cortically blind and having severe autism. In the months that followed, I lost my job because of my daughter's around-the-clock medical needs. Our bills became overwhelming. My husband, a Catholic high school teacher, and I were drowning in debt. Our secure, predictable, middle-class life was gone. I sought support through online forums with other mothers facing similar challenges. Through one exchange, I was introduced to the art of making handmade soaps and cosmetics. I was amazed at how easy it was to make high-quality, small batches of products for my family and friends. I registered for a local high school craft show and sold out. My first wholesale account was from a craft show customer whose brother owned a shop in California. He was delighted I would make 10 bars of a custom soap in any combination of scent and color and fill that order within 48 hours. At home, I built my business, and it worked. I loved what I was doing, and most important, it saved my family from foreclosure and allowed us to pay overwhelming medical bills. In 1999, I founded the company Wholesale Supplies Plus. My goal was to teach others how to make their own handcrafted cosmetics and provide supplies in very small quantities that startup businesses could afford to purchase. Today, Wholesale Supplies Plus has 100,000 unique customers buying from us in the United States. We will exceed $10 million in sales this year and have 35 employees. In a recent collaboration of data sharing, it was concluded that there are over 200,000 businesses hand-producing cosmetics in the United States today. 95% of these are women-owned businesses and average between 1 and 3 employees. That translates to between 200,000 and 600,000 jobs in the United States today. The handmade cosmetic industry supports the Congress's efforts to ensure safe cosmetics. We believe our products are the safest on the market. We personally inspect each ingredient and have our hands in every part of the manufacturing process. Most ingredients we use are food grade and can be found at grocery stores. We support the principles of giving the FDA recall authority. We support the principles of mandatory adverse event reporting for serious reactions that cause loss of life. We support the closing of labeling loopholes such as current incidental ingredient exclusions that are used to hide things such as preservatives from the consumer. We support small business exemptions for facility registration. These exemptions would allow individuals to make products for themselves, their friends, their family, without the fear of breaking federal laws. Small business exemptions will encourage entrepreneurial growth and create local jobs. We support small business exemptions for fees. Fees are a barrier for entering into our market and will shut down all but a few of the 200,000 companies now producing handmade cosmetics and soap in our industry. We do not support reporting to the FDA individual product batches, including ingredient suppliers used in that batch. Under the considered provision, it presumes truckload purchases of ingredients. That's not the case with our small businesses. We frequently buy small quantities of ingredients several times a week. Requiring us to report to the FDA each time we change suppliers only serves to give large corporations a greater market advantage over small businesses. Quite simply, for every report a large corporation files, a handmade producer may need to file up to 5,000 reports a month. Small businesses cannot afford to manage such a mandate, and frankly, it does nothing to improve the safety of cosmetics. I am not here seeking exemptions for Wholesale Supplies Plus. I am here so that the 200,000 small businesses making handcrafted cosmetics have the same opportunity to grow and become the next success story, like Burt's Bees, like Mary Kay Cosmetics, and even James Gamble of Procter & Gamble, all of whom started as handcrafted micro businesses. As Ronald Reagan said during his first inaugural address, government can and must provide opportunity, not smother it. Foster productivity, not stifle it. On behalf of the handcrafted soap and cosmetic industry, I hope for the opportunity to work with this subcommittee on legislation as it moves forward. Testifying today has been my honor and privilege. Thank you.
Chair thanks the gentlelady and now recognizes Dr. DeBartolomeus for 5 minutes for questions, or for opening statement.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee. My name is Dr. Michael DeBartolomeus, and I'm a toxicologist and chief of the Safe Cosmetics Program, which was established in the California Department of Public Health in 2006. In this role, I have heard concerns from many consumers and professionals in the personal care industry about cosmetic products and the negative health effects they may have on susceptible persons, the lack of information available on their ingredients, the number of chemicals and formulations in them that have not undergone toxicity testing, the unknown health impacts from long-term low-dose exposure to individual chemicals or chemical mixtures, and insufficient consumer and workplace safety standards and enforcement. We use cosmetics from infancy through our senior years on a daily basis. Women use an average of 15 cosmetic products per day, and daily usage may be as high as 50 products. Exposure to chemicals in cosmetics can occur from breathing vapors or particles, inadvertent swallowing, and by application to the skin and eyes. The cosmetics provision within the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was written over 70 years ago. Since that time, the cosmetics industry has grown to be a multi-billion-dollar industry, with products being marketed worldwide and sold not only in retail stores, but by individuals working out of their homes and over the internet. While the industry has changed, the provisions of federal law for regulating cosmetics have not. As a result, the burden falls on government to show harm before a cosmetic can be removed from the market. No pre-market safety testing is required. Manufacturers have almost no incentive to test products for their potential to cause serious latent harm, such as cancer. Cosmetic labels are not required to disclose some ingredients, and there are no requirements to disclose them to the federal government. And chemicals that can cause cancer, reproductive and/or developmental harm are consistently ending up in cosmetic products. The California Safe Cosmetics Act of 2005 requires manufacturers to disclose to the state all intentionally added chemical ingredients in their products that cause these adverse effects regardless of concentration. The Act also requires manufacturers to submit any additional information on their products as deemed necessary by the program to conduct its investigations. The FDA does not have comparable authority. Although the Act does not set safety standards or product bans, it responds to public concerns by empowering consumers to avoid the most toxic chemicals, thereby promoting product reformulation. By the end of last year, over 17,000 cosmetic products were reported to the program by 700 unique companies as containing one or more reportable chemical ingredients. In total, 24,664 hazardous ingredients were reported in these products, represented by 96 different chemicals. The data collected by the Safe Cosmetics program are used to target health investigations, laboratory analyses, and issue health advisories. For example, in March 2010, the program started receiving phone calls from hairstylists and clients complaining about the health effects from using a hair straightening product called Brazilian blowout. Complaints included burning eyes, nose, throat, and scalp, hair loss, asthma episodes, skin blisters, and other effects consistent with formaldehyde, a known human carcinogen. However, this product was advertised as formaldehyde-free. What happened over the next 22 months is too long of a story for me to tell here. However, the end result is informative. On January 30, 2012, California announced a settlement with the makers of Brazilian blowout, requiring that they warn consumers about the dangers of using their product and stop marketing their product as formaldehyde-free. It was the first government enforceable action in the United States to address the exposure to formaldehyde associated with these products. Although the sale of this product in California violated 5 separate state laws and resulted in numerous acute injuries, these products are still being used in salons across the U.S. In contrast, 6 countries have recalled the use of formaldehyde-based straighteners. On March 6, 2012, the New York Times reported that the makers of Brazilian blowout agreed to settle a class action suit for $4.5 million. The CEO said the settlement would be paid by his insurance company and was quoted saying, "We get to sell our product forever without reformulation. That's the acquittal we've been waiting for." Over the past 6 years, I've contemplated the challenges related to evaluating cosmetic product safety, and I've rated 5 elements which I believe would help in protecting public health. Number 1, remove the burden of proof from government having to demonstrate harm by instead requiring manufacturers to document product safety through pre-market testing of new cosmetics using a tiered battery of toxicity tests. Ensure that toxicity testing and safety, number 2, ensuring that toxicity testing and safety data and other key information are available to government agencies and consumers. Number 3, improve cosmetic labeling so that all chemical ingredients, including fragrances, colors, and flavors, and those in professional grade products, are disclosed to consumers. Number 4, establish safety standards for cosmetics and issue prompt mandatory recalls when they are found to be unsafe, adulterated, or misbranded. And 5, if a standing science advisory committee for cosmetic safety is thought to be valuable, require that it be wholly independent rather than industry-sponsored and that its members have no conflicts of interest. I don't know how many cases like Brazilian blowout exist. However, the fact is cosmetics that contain known human carcinogens or chemicals that impair human reproduction or development or are toxic to the endocrine system are marketed and sold without adequate safety testing because the existing law allows it. This is a very serious public health problem which we can prevent because there are some very workable solutions to consider. I want to thank the committee for inviting me, and I would be happy to answer your questions.
Chair thanks the gentleman, and I'll now begin questioning and recognize myself 5 minutes for that purpose. Dr. Zlavik. I'm sorry, you didn't say something?
No.
Ms. Schakowsky indicated that the Cosmetic Ingredient Review Panel has reviewed over 1,000 ingredients. Dr. Landa on the last panel stated that he was not aware of a single instance where the FDA has disagreed with a CIR recommendation. Are you aware of an instance where the FDA has disagreed with the CIR recommendation?
No, I am not.
Mr. Hutt, in your long experience, are you aware of any? The same question.
As you know, and as Mr. Landa mentioned, FDA participates in the every single deliberation of the Cosmetic Ingredient Review Expert Panel. We are unaware of any instance where the panel did not listen closely to FDA or where FDA disagreed with the panel recommendation.
All right. Let me continue with you, Mr. Hutt. Have states tried to ban cosmetics and their ingredients, and speak as to why a national uniformity of cosmetic regulation is important?
I'm not aware that states have taken action against cosmetic ingredients to ban them. I've just listened to the testimony from Dr. DeBartolomas, I hope I get that right, that the state there was unable to come up with sufficient evidence to ban the Brazilian blowout product. In contrast, when the Cosmetic Ingredient Review took a look at the request of FDA at the safety of that product, and I'd like to turn to Dr. Breslowek to discuss this in greater detail, but what happened was the Cosmetic Ingredient Review Panel recommended a ban of the product for use in hair straightening. So here's a good example where the voluntary self-regulation is much more stringent, certainly than the state of California, and perhaps even than the Food and Drug Administration.
Dr. Breslowek, would you?
Yes,
please
I'd love to
continue?
elaborate on that. The Food and Drug Administration approached the Cosmetic Ingredient Review, having heard of adverse effects resulting from hair straighteners that claim not to contain formaldehyde. The Cosmetic Ingredient Review Panel accepted the request for review and completed a review within a year, which is very, very short period of time. There was a very robust discussion about the safety of hair straighteners, whether formaldehyde was actually in the straighteners, because a lot of them were labeled as formaldehyde-free when in fact they contained methylene glycol, which when in liquid, which essentially is formaldehyde in liquid form. Following a very robust discussion, the CIR panel of experts determined that formaldehyde and methylene glycol in hair straighteners was not safe. And as a result of that, and the Personal Care Products Council agreed with their determination and supported their determination.
Ms. Danduran, Ms. May, your stories were inspiring, compelling. I'd like to ask both of you, should the cosmetic regulations be updated, in your opinion?
Well, as I said in my opening remarks, I think we need a national standard. And I think that I am in favor of registration of the facilities and providing the FDA with our ingredients so they do have a database. I would be supportive of both of those.
Ms. May?
I think as witness testimony today, cosmetics are safe in the United States, of the safest products that the FDA regulates. My fear is that as legislation moves forward, there will be unintended consequences to small businesses and an economic impact.
And we don't have long, but Dr. DeBartolomas, I'm sorry I can't get your pronunciation correct. You want to add to that your opinion on regulations being updated?
Actually, what I would like to just clarify something. I did not testify that the California Department of Public Health didn't have evidence to show that Brazilian blowout wasn't harmful and shouldn't be removed from the market. We just lacked the authority to actually recall the product and remove it from the market.
Mr. Hutt, was the product seized? What was the follow-up? We're not.
The product was not seized. The resolution in California was simply to put information on the label and in the beauty salons. The state of California does have what is called a baby food and drug law statute. It's called the Sherman Act in California. It does permit for taking cosmetic products that are adulterated off the market, but California did not choose to use that authority. They do have the authority.
Okay, thank you. My time is up. Chair recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Wagner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Pallone, for allowing me to go before you and answering questions. Dr. DeBartolomeus, thank you very much for being here today. It should go without saying that the fact you're here demonstrates just how important it is to California that its law be preserved. As I understand, the California Safe Cosmetics Act of 2005 contains a number of provisions that would seem to be essential to any system designed to ensure the safety of cosmetics in our country. First and foremost, the California law requires companies to disclose to the state if the ingredients in their products could cause cancer, reproductive harm, or birth defects. And the law, at the same time, still protects trade secret information, so this is a very reasonable approach. The Sherman law in California is a law that I voted for when I was in the state legislature, and it again showed that California was ahead of the rest of the country. But there are limits to what you can do even in the California law, and you talked about that earlier. In your testimony, you mentioned 700 companies have complied with the reporting requirements in California. Do you have a sense of whether this system has been onerous for companies? Do you get information from both large and small companies?
We do. The actual limit is $1 million of aggregate sales. So
is your microphone on, by the way, just to be sure?
Oh, I think it is now. Okay. Sorry. So the aggregate sales of $1 million is the cutoff. So any company smaller than that would not have to report. We actually have helplines. We have an email that people can email us. In our reporting system, we have comment and an area where people can comment. We receive calls all the time. We work with manufacturers to report, and we have never received any comments that the reporting was too onerous for them to do.
You mentioned some staggering numbers in your testimony. Over 24,000 hazardous ingredients have been reported to the state. Yet one of the claims that we've repeatedly heard is that the cosmetics do not present significant risk to consumers because they are not ingested. As a toxicologist in charge of the California Cosmetics Program, can you give us some sense of for how much comfort we should take from the claims that the cosmetics are inherently safe because they are not ingested? It would be helpful if you could use examples of ingredients found in cosmetics to help us understand this issue better.
Well, the two that have been brought up here today, not just by me but others, Brazilian blowout is something you breathe. So it's not something that you're applying it, but you're actually breathing the formaldehyde that comes out from using this chemical and using this formulation. We've heard about mercury in face creams. That's something that you're rubbing on your skin, but mercury sinks in, and we actually have frank mercury toxicity in mothers and kids who have been exposed to these products. You could add nail polishes and nail polish removers to that. You're breathing in toluene vapors, you're getting exposed to phthalates, and possibly even formaldehyde. So those are three examples right there that are not just from skin, but other sources of exposure.
The industry legislative proposal would require national uniformity in cosmetics oversight, and of course national uniformity is a nice way of saying that Congress will override and preempt state laws. As a general matter, I think preemption is a bad idea. However, there are instances in which preemption can make sense, particularly when the federal law is strong and there are multiple state laws with different requirements. Your testimony describes 5 elements that would, in your view, be important to have a strong cosmetics regulatory program. And my understanding is that none of these elements is reflected in the industry proposal. If a federal system were to be put in place that does not contain these elements, would you be concerned about that system preempting a law like California's Do states need to preserve their ability to apply more stringent standards regarding information disclosure and safety determination of cosmetics ingredients?
Well, the short answer is yes, I would be concerned. You know, disclosure and being able to, authorizing the state to get more information from cosmetic manufacturers and then conducting health investigations are pretty strong requirements and mandates, but actually I don't even think those go far enough, to be honest with you. So I would be concerned if the federal law were actually less stringent.
Thank you, thank you. Ms. May, I want to thank you for coming to speak to us today. Your story is certainly very touching and inspiring. You mentioned in your testimony that you support banning unsafe ingredients, giving FDA recall authority, and requiring reporting of adverse events and serious reactions in connection with cosmetic products. I know that I share the belief with many of my colleagues that these are important powers for the FDA to have. Can you elaborate on why it's important that the FDA have these powers?
The FDA
Is your mic
Can
on?
you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. There, now, okay. We feel that the FDA should have the authorities to substantiate all cosmetic ingredient safety studies, that they are the impartial entity to evaluate any studies that are brought that are of concern. We support only safe ingredients in cosmetics, and we feel an impartial group of people through the FDA only to substantiate that is the best system.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair thanks, gentlemen, and now recognize Dr. Gingrey for 5 minutes for questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I apologize to the panelists for walking in late, but we had a concurrent subcommittee hearing downstairs, and it's impossible to be at both two places at one time. But let me start off by just asking a very straightforward, simple softball question to each one of you, and I'll start. And how do you pronounce your name, Doctor?
Breslavek.
Thank you. We'll start with you and then go down the panel. Do you believe that decisions on the safety of cosmetic products should be based off of science or politics?
Science.
Mr. Hutt, you're up.
You're asking me the
Oh,
same question, sir?
Absolutely.
I believe very strongly that it should be based on science. In my 4 years as chief counsel of FDA, we always based our decisions on the best science that was available.
Science.
Science.
When adequate studies are available and have been done and disclosed, and the information is the scientific information is done according to standards, I would have to say the science is important, the most important decision-making factor. But there are times when you actually don't have that information, and pretty much for almost all cosmetic products, for long-term effects, that's the situation.
Are you suggesting that then politics plays a role?
No, but there have to be something else enters into the decision-making process. It can't be just the science because you don't have the science.
Well, I thank all of you for your forthrightness in responding to that question. Let me turn to Mr. Hutt in regard to these series of questions. Have states tried to ban cosmetics and their ingredients?
States have, in a few instances, set standards for particular ingredients. For example, mercury that sometimes appears in cosmetics. I'm unaware of any specific cosmetics other than the Brazilian blowout that we have discussed previously, where a cosmetic has been attempted to be banned. But as we heard from just a few moments ago, the state did not even ask for a ban, even though they could have under their law.
Let me ask you this, if you think this is true. Why is national uniformity of cosmetic regulation important? Do you think it is important, and why?
It is extremely important. The cosmetic industry in the United States is a national industry. It's not a local industry. Even the smallest of cosmetic companies does not limit their product to one state. They're shipped all over the country, indeed all over the world. And if we have different requirements in different states, we're going to have just massive confusion in our country. It would be like in the automobile industry. Suppose we didn't have a national standard for automobile safety. You'd have to stop at every border and get approval to go into the next state. The same is true for cosmetics.
Let me address this question, and I thank you, Mr. Hutt. Ms. Danderon, I saw that the President's budget requested $19 billion in cosmetic user fees. Do you think that the FDA needs these user fees? I was under the impression that in the last several years that the FDA budget in regard to cosmetic oversight has increased substantially. So an additional $19 billion in cosmetic user fees. Your thoughts on that, or any of the other members of the panel might want to comment as well?
Well, I'm not in favor of user fees. I really don't want to absorb any additional cost to my small business at this time. And if I'm not clear on what the benefit to my business would be for that user fee.
You're clear what
I'm not clear.
The lack of benefits might be in regard to your bottom line.
Correct.
Anyone else? Yeah, Ms. May, please.
I'm not sure, with the volumes of paperwork and the number of employees that the FDA is going to need to hire to handle the provisions of the bill, that $19 million is even going to be enough. They're talking about registering every product, every bottle of lotion. If a small...
By the way, thank you for correcting me. That
Thank
was a
Did I correct?
million versus a billion. There's a difference there. Even in Congress.
Even if a company has to register every single bottle of lotion, every formula, our industry in the handcrafted soap and cosmetic industry, we may have a customer that comes to us and a child has a nut allergy, and they ask us to change out the oil in a lotion so that their child doesn't have an allergic reaction. We would need to pause, stop, notify the FDA of a change. We change a fragrance oil. We change any additive. We would need to re-register that product every time with the FDA. That's up to 1,000, at minimum 5,000 reports a month one small business will need to file. I don't know how the FDA is going to manage all of that paperwork and oversee that.
Well, I'm going to have to stop right there because we're already a minute over time. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence, and thank you, panelists.
Chair, thanks, gentlemen. Recognize the ranking member, Mr. Malone, 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to start with Ms. May, and thank you for speaking to us today. And your story was certainly very, very touching and inspiring. I note that in your current business, you're a supplier to small cosmetic manufacturers, and some of the proposals we've seen include provisions that require manufacturers to keep or provide information to substantiate the safety of their ingredients and products. Could you just tell us whether you think this would be an important requirement to have in a new law?
I believe the FDA should substantiate the safety of all cosmetic ingredients.
Okay, but what I'm asking is whether they would require manufacturers to keep or provide information to substantiate the safety.
Under the current FDA provisions, an ingredient is actually called a cosmetic. So I think it's important to recognize the difference between an ingredient manufacturer and somebody blending ingredients together at an approved level. I feel all ingredient manufacturers, if they're marketing to the cosmetic industry and telling us that something should be used at a certain percent, at a certain temperature, at a certain pH, they should substantiate that claim. That's how our industry is using those ingredients.
Okay, thanks. Let me go to Dr. DeBartolomeus. You mentioned in your testimony the importance of mandatory recall authority to remove cosmetics that have been found to be unsafe, adulterated, or misbranded, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I have a proposal that would give the FDA this authority to issue mandatory recalls. It seems to me that the Brazilian blowout case, which has been mentioned by many people, including Ms. Schakowsky, would be a good candidate for the use of this mandatory recall authority. And you mentioned in your testimony there have been efforts to call attention to the dangers of these kinds of products, but they're still being used throughout the United States. And yet 6 countries have recalled products like that. So can you describe in more detail the types of dangers California saw associated with these products and whether you think recall authority would have been helpful to California in its efforts?
Right. Well, first of all, the cosmetics program is not regulatory, so we ourselves don't have the authority to remove a product from the market. It would have to be our parallel Food and Drug branch to the, FDA equivalent. As far as I know, they were in the process of moving down that road, but they, for whatever reason, have not completed that step. So if there was a recall, mandatory recall authority, whether it's at the federal or at the state level, this product would have been removed before it even had to go to court. And it was ridiculous that we had to spend almost 2 years going to court, and all we got was a warning label, a pat on the a slap on the wrist, and then a manufacturer saying, "Great, we just got relieved of any responsibility."
So obviously, you'd like to see the FDA have that as well as.
Well, I think that that's an important feature of any legislation.
Now I know that I just want to issue about these other things that I've talked about in my legislation, but they're not on your list, I guess, of the 5 basic elements for a cosmetic regulatory program that you outlined. And I want you just go through them and tell me whether you agree that it would be important to have them. So would you think it would be important to have mandatory registration, first of all?
I'm actually not even clear exactly what that would be. I haven't read any of the federal legislation, so I need a little bit more information. But we have a mandatory reporting, and if it's a matter of if the equivalent, then I think that's part of the disclosure aspect, and I think that that's very important.
What about the adverse event reporting? That's
that's an interesting
sounds
thing that
like
I didn't think
you
about.
have adverse event reporting, but not mandatory registration. Is that accurate or not?
For which, I'm sorry.
In other words,
California?
I'm getting the impression that you have in California what I call adverse event reporting, but not mandatory registration.
The cosmetics program doesn't have either of those two things.
Oh, you don't?
But it may be actually in parallel to what, if the Food and Drug Administration has some kind of event reporting, it probably does exist in the Sherman Law as well. I'm just not that familiar.
Well, let me just ask you, I mean, I'm just trying to get a handle on, the registration, the adverse event reporting, good manufacturing processes, if you want to just comment on those, because I know they weren't listed in your 5 basic elements.
I was told to keep it to 5. So, good mandatory practices are comparable, I think, in a way to doing toxicity testing according to standards. And so anytime you have standards that are going to be met by all the manufacturers as well as by other entities that are going to be reviewing them, I think that's a good thing to do. If we had a mandatory event reporting, adverse event reporting system in place for Brazilian blowout, for example, they would not have had to come to our program first. I mean, there would have been some system in place. I have 2 staff and a budget of $280,000 to run this program. So $19 million sounds really good to me. And, to actually have us responding to phone calls and then calling the Department of Justice and starting this process just seems pretty inefficient. There should be a better way, and it should be a much more succinct and really quick way to do this process.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Thanks, gentlemen. And now recognize the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Hutt, the European Union has banned or restricted the use of over 1,200 chemicals linked to cancer, reproductive and developmental harm from cosmetics. So just yes or no, does the Personal Care Products Council support a similar ban or restriction here in the U.S. on carcinogens, mutagens, and reproductive toxins?
No, because those aren't used in the United States.
Well, Mr. D. Bartolomus, would that be the result of your reports, 24,000, almost 25,000 hazardous ingredients? Were any of those carcinogens, mutagens, and reproductive toxins that were reported? to you?
The law requires chemicals that are known or suspected to cause cancer, reproductive harm, or birth defects to be reported to us. So all those 24,664 ingredients would all be one of those, or one or more of those hazardous effects.
And more than half of those were titanium dioxide reports. Titanium dioxide is approved by FDA both as a color additive and as an active ingredient in sunscreen products. And yet it had to be reported under the California law as a dangerous ingredient.
And what about the other half?
The other half were a wide variety of substances.
So let me get it clear. So you are saying that not one of the 24,664 hazard ingredients was in fact a hazardous ingredient?
I'm not aware that we use in the United States things that are absolutely banned in Europe. There may be a few exceptions.
And what about among the 10 chemicals that the FDA has actually said are hazardous, would include in Brazilian blowout formaldehyde?
Formaldehyde.
And is that okay? Should that be in a product?
Let me turn that over to Dr. Brzezlowicz.
Formaldehyde can be used safely in cosmetics as a preservative at very low levels.
Okay, all right. You know, I mean, we've gone through the Brazilian blowout situation, and if there's disagreement, and maybe you want to talk to that, Dr. D, because you know, I've been very involved in that product as well, and it seems indisputable to me that this is a hazardous product. But the question is whether or not there should be some authority to actually recall or ban before marketed products that are found, according to science, which everybody here agreed with, are dangerous to consumers.
Well, I think you've made an important distinction, because what we were dealing with Brazilian blowout was well after it had been being used for years. You know, formaldehyde in these products. It should never have gone onto the market in the first place, having levels, whether you call it methylene glycol or formaldehyde, at those levels where workers daily are going to be exposed to a carcinogen, a known human carcinogen. So really, we're talking about how do you prevent that from happening in the first place. I don't think it's an effective or efficient public health mechanism to deal with something that's after the effect and you're trying to clean up the mess. You really want to have it not go onto the market in the first place.
The Cosmetic Industries Trade Association argues that dose makes the poison, and just a little bit of a known carcinogen or reproductive toxin in a cosmetic product won't hurt anyone if the product is, quote, used as directed, unquote. So again, Dr. D, if you could tell us whether you agree with that assessment.
Yeah, there's a lot of science tied up in all that, but I guess the short answer is for most products that contain chemical carcinogens, the dose and risk are very much a difficult thing to analyze, and what is acceptable risk to you might be not acceptable to me. So it's a really difficult situation. So I'd have to say carcinogens should really not be in these products at all, especially when they're being used from infancy throughout the course of somebody's life span.
And just personally, I know that it's taking me longer and longer to use all the products that I now find as I age. And so I am concerned about the cumulative effect of the many products that I schlep around in my purse and in my cabinets. So I think that we need, obviously, I think, to do more science, and I think we need to get more legislation, and I appreciate your efforts in California. Thank you.
Chair, thanks, gentlelady. That concludes the questioning of our panel. At this time, I'd like to request unanimous consent that statements from Personal Care Truth and Indie Beauty Network and Handcrafted Soap Makers Guild, Inc. be submitted to the record. Without objection, so ordered. I want to remind members that they have 10 business days to submit questions for the record, and I ask the witnesses to respond to the questions promptly. Thank you very much for your testimony, for answering all of our questions. Very, very informative panel. Members should submit their questions by the close of business on Monday, April 9th. Without objection, the subcommittee is adjourned.
Ms. May, that was an extraordinary,
Thank you.
just extraordinary accomplishment that you've
Thank
gone
you.
through.
Thank you.
You have so much courage.
It's okay. Coming here today and
No,
thank you very much.
just
Thank you.
your life is an inspiration.
I saw him looking at it, and then I thought,
Thank you.
I'm like, I've got to see this.
It is well.
Yeah, I think a lot of the same.
I handed